Actually, since we were just talking about that, how many of you, show of hands, are planning on applying to grad school? Today's lecture is short. You guys have any questions?
I was just going to ask because I heard you guys talking. You talked about research experience being really important. How do you get that?
So the easiest way to do it, and this is nice because Douglas has it, is do an honors degree. So if you do an honors degree, part of the package is you do an honors thesis, which is, you know, a mini research project. So that's the most straightforward way to do it. You can also apply to volunteer at labs at other universities. So Douglas doesn't really have a lab. So if you apply like to SFU, not apply to go there, but you can even just email people who direct labs at places and say, hey, is there some work for me to do? And if you email a few, you'll probably find one.
Another option is on the Douglas careers. There are typically call out for research assistants in all sorts of departments.
So yeah, and I should clarify because there's different types of grad school. Where this is really important is if you're doing a master's or PhD in experimental, so you know, social psych, cognitive psych, anything like that. If you want to get into clinical or counseling, research experience still helps, but maybe more important is having some applied psych experience, like suicide hotline or working with people with addictions or something like that. And if you have both, of course, that's great. There were some other hands of people who said. But any other questions about grad school since we're all here?
Okay, I mean,
Yeah, sure.
My situation is that I have a bachelor's.
What's that?
My situation is that I have a bachelor's in mathematics that's very old.
Oh.
And I'm kind of looking to just do the prereqs and then try to get it. So I feel like because I'm not getting a full bachelor's degree, I don't know how much access I have to a lot of these things.
I think that psychologists have physics and math envy, and if you have a bachelor's in math, that will be impressive.
I'm hoping that's where to
Especially, and no, I mean, like, especially in areas like cognitive psych,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, you know, mathematical modeling at the really advanced stuff, and you would be, like, you would stand out, I think, because, you know, most people in psych don't have an advanced mathematics background and can't do the kinds of advanced modeling that's sometimes done, or at least it takes longer for them to learn. So for some programs, I think that would be actually a big advantage. Yep.
How many classes do you need to take with a professor before you ask them for a reference?
Well, you can take one. I mean, it's really a matter of how much you stand out. So as someone who's had to write a few letters, the more exposure so it's better at a place like this actually, because if you're someone who, you know, asks questions in class or occasionally comes to office hours, then it's much easier. You have something to work with. Whereas, so I would say make yourself known to the professor in some way. There's nothing worse, well actually, that statement is almost never true. There's many things that are worse, but something that is bad is having to write a reference letter for someone who attended a large intro class and all you know is their grade. Like I've had students who I taught at the U of A where it's 350 students and they're like, "Hi, can you write me a letter?" I've never met them. I have no idea who they are. They got a B+. I'm like, okay, I mean, if you really want, but he did well in the class. He had to study for tests in order to do well in the class. That's all I've got. Like so if you can make yourself known, it makes it easy. And actually, one thing I'll add to that, this is allowed and it's definitely helpful. Send them not the letter they're going to write, but some bullet points of things that you want them to emphasize. That definitely makes it easier for us to write letters. Okay, so that was all for free, I suppose.
Thanks.
Actually, it was a lecture time, so we did kind of pay for it.
Actually, I guess that's right. Actually, okay, well, thanks for paying me for this service. Okay, so as you all hopefully know, peer review was due today. One thing I'd encourage you all to think about, and I'm sure many of you had this occur to you, obviously it helps the person you wrote the peer review for, but I find it can also be helpful for you. Because you're reading someone else's paper and you're like, geez, they're really not clear. They're not defining the important terms. And then you're like, wait, I didn't do that either. And so it can be helpful indirectly in that way too. So hopefully, at a minimum, it helps you to get peer review from someone else. But sometimes doing it for someone else can also alert you to things in your own paper. So we always do 2 chapters. So today we're doing 10 and 11.
Cool.
And we really are in the final stretch. So next week is test 3. And after that, there's just 2 lectures left. So there's test 3, 2 lectures after that. On the day of the final lecture, so the second lecture after test 3, the final paper is due. And then after that, test 4 is during exam period, final exam period. So we're definitely in the home stretch. We do have an optional test review day on the last day of class. I would have liked to have test 4 then, but I'm not allowed to have anything worth more than 10% on the last 2 weeks of class. So,
Spoil sports.
I know. Okay, so today we're talking about experiments. Both chapters 10 and 11 are on experiments. We'll be talking a bit about experiments in the second half of the class after test 3 as well, but today everything relates to experiments. So, chapter 10 starts off by distinguishing between subjects' experiments and within subjects' experiments. As a general bit of advice, if you see experiments discussed, you should assume it's between subjects. If you're given no other information. And all of the experiments we've talked about so far, and all the experiments you all designed, were between subjects. So between subjects is where you get a group of people, and you randomly assign them to 2 or more groups, and you do something to one group that you don't do to the other group. So this one is also sometimes called independent groups experiments. And it's called between because you're looking for differences between the 2 groups, right? This is where the comparison is. The comparison is between group 1 and group 2, and other groups if you have more conditions. Within subjects, also known as repeated measures, there's only one group, and everyone in the group does both levels of the independent variable, or is exposed to both levels of the independent variable. So if that all sounds very abstract, we're going to go ahead and do a within subjects experiment right now.
Party.
So, and if you're in my intro class, you would have done a similar one. So, here's how it's going to work. I'm going to read to you a series of word pairs, and I want you to audibly say them in your head. So, for example, this is one of the words, but if it was a jar apple, just in your head say jar apple. Okay? So here are, I'm going to do 8 word pairs. Pillow, cactus. Umbrella, pizza. Guitar, toothbrush. Elephant, pencil. Balloon, hammer. Telescope, pasta. Volcano, slippers. Octopus, bicycle. Okay, so now I'm going to read the first word of each of the pairs. Write down the second one if you remember it. Just make a little list on a piece of paper on your computer from 1 to 8. And I'm going to say again the first word for each one, and you'll write the second one if you remember it. Okay, number 1, pillow. Number 2, umbrella. Number 3, guitar. Number 4, elephant. Five, balloon. 6, telescope. 7, volcano. And 8, bicycle. Okay, I said one of them in the wrong order, but that's okay. We'll just we'll pretend it didn't happen. Okay, so here are the right answers. So 1, cactus, so just mark yourself right or wrong. 2, pizza. 3, toothbrush. 4, pencil. 5, hammer. 6, pasta. 7, slippers. And 8, octopus. So sorry, I flipped those around, but it's still at least from the right list. Okay, so add up what you got out of 8. And okay, so that's condition 1. Condition 2, same kind of activity. It'll be a different list of word pairs. But this time I want you to form a visual image with the 2 words. So again, if it was jar, apple, visualize whatever, like a jar with an apple in it, or whatever you want, but some kind of visual image with the 2 words representing the image. Okay, so we will now start. Lighthouse, scarf.
What was that word?
Lighthouse, scarf. Tornado, pot. Cactus, skateboard. Jellyfish, typewriter. Pyramid, raincoat. Waterfall, scissors. Kangaroo, light bulb. Sunflower, submarine. Okay, same task. I will read the first word of each of the pairs, write a list from 1 to 8, and write the second word if you remember it. Okay, word number 1, lighthouse. Number 2, tornado. Number 3, cactus. Number 4, jellyfish. Number 5, pyramid. 6, waterfall. 7, kangaroo. 8, sunflower. Okay.
I said dang.
Oh, dang. Okay, well, you're spoiling it. Well, I mean, you most probably didn't see this. Okay, so I'll give you the right answers. Okay, number 1, scarf. 2, pot. 3, skateboard. 4, typewriter. 5, raincoat. 6, scissors. 7, light bulb. And 8, submarine. Okay, so give yourself a total, And now look at which one you did better on. Show of hands, who did better on the first one? That's more than usual, but okay. Who did better on the second one? Right, so I've done this very, very many times. Usually it's one or two who do better on the first. It's usually overwhelmingly more do better on the second. So this is a great example. So first of all, in our little study, what is the independent variable? No.
The way we're told to think about the words.
The way you're told to think about the words, or you could say, if you want to make a memorization strategy would be the way to say it. Yeah.
I'm curious, do you ever have people who do the same on both?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, a handful. Like, I mean, by chance.
And do you typically have people who tell you that they use the same strategy for both?
So that would be cheating. So
Well, no, it's not
or I guess it
cheating.
would be a failure of the manipulation. So you didn't accord with instructions, but yeah.
Yeah, you can say that. I did.
Yeah, so did I.
And I did the same strategy for both because that's how I.
Yeah.
So one thing that we'll see later, there's something called a manipulation check, where you can check to see if the manipulation worked as intended. So in this case, one simple manipulation check would be, did you do as instructed? And if you say no, and you're honest, well then that would be one way to get at the idea.
Okay, but in this particular case, as soon as you said cactus pillow, I immediately pictured a cactus on a pillow and then
Yeah.
a pillow that is a cactus. It wasn't picture this. That's just how my brain works.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you,
So
you also did not tell me not to.
no, but of course, at least the intention of it is to have one be. So the way that the independent variable in this case is auditory versus visual. So the goal of the manipulation is to get you to do that. And if your brain is just such that you can't help but do visualizing, then this is a case where the manipulation didn't work as intended.
Okay.
And so you could get that with a manipulation check. And look, it may be that some people they just can't do it. And if I was being really, really careful, maybe I exclude people who say I can't help but form visual images.
So then, could this be common with visual learners then? So you'd have
Yeah,
to
but-
have asked that on your.
Yeah, so one thing you can ask is someone a visual learner, or just more simply, did you form visual images in the first condition? And maybe exclude them from the analysis, see if it makes a difference. Yep.
Can you ask people like if they think it was affected by something else? Because like for example, about halfway through the second one, I got bored and stopped paying attention.
Oh
Yeah,
my
good.
goodness.
So we're gonna talk about that exact thing.
Yeah.
So one, I guess I was gonna say this later, but one problem with the way I did this, which we'll talk about later, is I did not control for order effects. It may be that people did better on the second one because of the independent variable, which is visualizing versus auditory. Or it could be that people did better because now they've had practice. Or in your case, some people might do worse because they get bored or tired or irritated, or I'm seeing some nodding. So, if I was going to do this really carefully, half of you would do it in one order, half would do it in another order. So, but it's a very good question.
But can the participants like give feedback like that, so you could say like, oh, this person, we're gonna take them out because they're basically saying there was confounding.
I guess I'm wondering, so that particular confounding variable is taken care of if you do
Right.
like the order thing. I'd have to, I guess, know what the potential confounding variable in question is, but I'm not sure if anyone's done that, but it's an interesting idea, I guess. Yeah.
You have to have a control condition for this.
So not control condition, or by control condition, do you mean one where you just tell them nothing?
Yeah, something to compare it to.
That's better, if you have, one where you just give no instructions. But maybe I'm just interested in which of these two is better, and then what we did is fine. But if you want to know, how much better are they than nothing, then you want to have a control. Okay, so no other hands. Also, what's the dependent variable, just for completeness?
The word, writing down the word.
Yeah, like how many you get right, how well you do on the memory test. So, in a certain sense, when you do a within subjects design, you are your own control group, right? There's not separate groups. We're comparing how well you do when exposed to these two different manipulations. So, related term, when you do a between subjects design, the big thing you're trying to do is get rid of what the book calls selection differences. It would have been better for them to call it assignment differences. This just means differences between the two groups in terms of which people get put in which group.
And when you say differences, what do you mean by that?
So like maybe there's more. Let's say we did a between group study with what I just did. So we randomly assigned people to two groups, and one group is the visualizing group, and one is the auditory group. Well, maybe there's more people with good memories in the visualizing group, right? That would be a selection difference, or what I'd rather call an assignment difference.
Would this be a good place to use the term participant variables?
It's an example of participant variables, but it's cases where there are, you could say, differences on participant variables between these two groups.
Okay.
Now, of course, the main way we try to solve this is with random assignment. You hope that random assignment basically takes care of that, but random assignment is not foolproof. Even by chance, you can get more good memory people in one condition. Within subjects experiments, you don't have to worry about that because it's the same group in both conditions.
How is it different than sampling error?
It is, so sampling error is, I guess, similar, but sampling error is about people getting into your sample from the population. This is about people you already have in your sample and putting them into the two conditions. Okay, so the book talks about two advantages of the within subjects design. I'll just briefly talk about each of these. The first is you need fewer subjects. There's one simple reason for this. Let's say, it's actually even better than this, but let's say you just want 50 people per condition. If you're doing between, you need 100 people. If you're doing within, you only need 50. You actually probably need less, but because everyone is participating in each condition. So first, simple reason that within is better is you need fewer people. Another advantage is it has higher sensitivity. By which I mean it is easier to detect an effect with a within subjects design. It is easier to detect an effect. Why is that? And you'll get a more sophisticated account of why this is if you take a class like 3300. But just to give you an intuitive sense of why that is. All of the, or certainly most of the standard statistical tests, like the t-test or ANOVA, they all have this basic structure. Treatment, effect, divided by error. So, treatment effect meaning the difference between the two conditions, or more if you have more conditions, but let's focus on two conditions. So like in our case, the difference between visualizing and auditory. And that is then divided by some, I have 3 R's, wow. I have no excuse. I was going to say I didn't sleep well, but I actually had a great sleep, so no, it's not bad.
It's because you wanted to show us what error looks like.
Oh, right. Thanks. Okay. If I'm ever accused of something, I hope you become a lawyer.
I intend to be a psychologist.
Too bad. My mom wanted me to be a lawyer. It's a popular job among mothers, to root for, but and I think if I was a lawyer, I would cease to enjoy being alive. But anyways, hey, if you want to become a lawyer, yeah, hats off to you. So, some measure of error, some measure of random variation. If you're doing a between subjects design, the error term relates to differences between people, just random differences between people. If it's a within subjects design, the error term relates to differences within each person. And the intuition you should have is those differences will be smaller. Put another way, who's the most similar to you? You. So the error, so someone's grunting. So think of it, and this isn't quite right, there's a bit more to build in here, but how you do on random word pairs compared to each other. So just kind of random variation in how well you do on the memorizing the words. And differences between you at different times will be smaller than differences between you and other people. And if the error term is smaller, the overall thing will be bigger. Yep.
How do statistics account for this since we're not, like if we had a survey given to the same population or two different populations, the results will look the same mathematically. Like how could the t-test be different?
So here's the, what I will say there is, don't worry about it. All you have to know, so there is going to be a question on this, all you have to be able to say is, it is easier to detect an effect with within. I don't remember how to, the term, if you're doing an ANOVA, for example, is SS residual. I don't remember how to calculate it.
So it's just like you just give it a different parameter.
It's a different parameter,
I see.
yes. And it's the parameter SS residual relates to differences within one person, or within each person. But how to calculate it? Take 3300. I don't remember how to do it. But even this, you don't have to know. This is just to give you an intuition for why this is true. It's easier to detect an effect with the within subjects design.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
On your keyword, on your keywords, you have within subject design advantages, and then you have the answers below that as separate keywords.
Yep.
So if you were to give the first keyword, if you were to give within subjects design advantages on a test,
I'm in a good mood. This is one of the written. So basically, those won't be definition questions. One of the written is going, I was going to say this at the end of class anyways, I guess, but one of the questions is, give a concrete example of a within subjects design and talk about the two advantages.
okay.
So that one should be a layup. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, so you have
Would
to,
we do this as an example?
sure.
Okay.
It'd be weird to say no. But you can do anything except memory of words, yeah. Sure. I feel like now I'm gonna get like 25.
Everyone is
Like, yeah,
Okay,
there's gonna be a few
everyone.
people. Yeah.
Let's all memorize one answer just to make sure that we psych them out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It'll make marking easier, I guess.
And then there's one
Yeah, that's
person
right.
that's just like
another
really, really
another
well.
visual memory. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the next term, or actually, any questions on this? Given that you now know it's important. Okay. So this relates to a question someone asked. The key thing that I did not do in our within subjects experiment is I didn't control for order effects. So order effects means, excuse me, the effect that order has on the dependent variable.
The order of.
Order of the conditions. So in our case, we did auditory first, visualizing second, so that's the order that we did it in. And it could be that affected how people did. And there are, broadly speaking, three kinds of order effects. Practice, so this is ways in which order can make you do better. So it could be that some of you did better on the second one not because of the visualizing, but because you have practice. You now know what to expect, your memory's fired up, and that's why you do better. So really, these order effects are just a special case of confounding variables, right? It's a case where there's a difference between the two conditions other than the independent variable. We want auditory versus visual to be the only difference, but in the way we did it, there's an order effect. So one is practice, you do better because you've had practice. The one that the student mentioned is a fatigue. So this is sort of the opposite. Maybe you do worse on the second one because you're tired and irritated with the experiment. And the last one is contrast. So this is less clear in a case like a memory task, but maybe when you do it the second time, you just want to be different. You don't like clicking the same answer over and over again. Maybe it's like a mood questionnaire or something, and you may give a different answer just for the sake of giving a different answer. So how do we control for this? The simplest way is counterbalancing. So you just randomize the order. Some people do it like we did, auditory then visual. Some people do it visual then auditory. Problem solved. So that's really simple. If you just have two conditions, if you have lots of conditions, as we'll see later in a future chapter, you can have multiple independent variables manipulated at the same time, each with multiple conditions, and then the number of conditions can get quite big. So this part is not testable. There's something called the Latin square design, where you can cut down on how many different orders you have to have, but don't worry about that for the test. I just mentioned that in case you're curious when you see it. For the test, counterbalancing is good. That's the simple one. Okay, so why would we ever do between subjects design? And in fact, certainly in my experience, probably most experiments in psychology are between. One downside of within, which I guess by definition is therefore an advantage of between, between subjects designs are less subject to demand characteristics. So what are demand characteristics? This is where the subject gets a sense of what the hypothesis is and kind of tries to help the researcher out, whether consciously or not. So you kind of get a sense of what the researcher is looking for and try to confirm the hypothesis, or at least the hypothesis they think the researcher is looking for. And if it's a within subjects design, it's pretty easy to figure out what it is. So for example, if you're doing this, it's like, I think he wants to see what effect these two things have on memory. Now, it's a bit harder to fake doing well on memory, but let's say I wanted to see what effect a manipulation had on your mood. And I give you two different things and then ask what your mood is right after each one. It's like, okay, pretty easy to figure out what the person's looking for. It's harder in a between subjects design because you don't see the other condition.
question.
Yep.
Would say a survey that just had a bunch of different questions, but during that survey you're exposing them to two different things that you want to be exposing them to and seeing how they respond to that. Would that be considered like a within, like would that be considered an experiment and a within subject design experiment? Because you're not like explicitly separating the two.
I'm not sure I understand. So there's a survey, you expose people to two things and then see what they say after?
Like throughout the survey, you're kind of like, the example is relevant to my other class, which is why I bring this up. But like you're exposing them to like 10 people within the survey and asking questions about those people, right? And
You expose them to 10 different people.
like pictures of people, yeah.
Okay, so 10 pictures of people, okay.
And like you're throughout the same survey, you're asking questions about each person, but like the idea in your head, you use these 10 people are kind of stuff. Would that just be considered?
This
an
could be,
experiment,
it
or-
depends. So is there some kind of difference between the 10 people that's you could conceptualize as an independent variable?
Yeah.
So like, let's say, it's 10 people that vary in terms of how good looking they
Yeah.
are, and you have a good looking and less good looking picture for the other 9, and you look at how they respond. Sure. You could call that a within subjects design.
Okay.
The other one, this is probably a bigger reason why between is often used, is you sort of have to use it if it's a more long-lasting intervention. In fact, really, it doesn't have to be all that long, even moderately long-lasting. So, an obvious case is drug versus placebo, right? You can't, okay, here's the drug, here's the placebo, like, one day to the next, given that the effects last longer than that. The book uses an extreme example. If you are doing some kind of new surgery and you want to do an experiment, you can't do both. Once you take the brain area out or do the brain surgery's been done, right? So it has to be between subjects.
How would you exactly phrase that in a sentence?
The more long-lasting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the effect of the independent variable is more long-lasting, you essentially have to use independent samples or between subjects.
As the effect will wear off quickly enough.
Yeah, so let's say I want to measure the effect of adrenaline on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do the within subjects like right now.
Oh no, I understand it. I'm just trying to figure out how to put it into a sentence.
Yeah, that's fine. So if you just write down, like what I just said, that's good enough. You don't have to cash up extra. The extra stuff I said is just so you understand why that's the case. Okay, so related to the demand characteristics issue, we can further subdivide between subjects experiments. There is a pre-test, post-test, and post-test only. So let's say we're doing an antidepressant trial. So I randomly assign people to 2 conditions. One group gets the antidepressant, one group gets the placebo. Obviously at the end, when they've had the drug for a certain number of weeks, we're going to ask them, how happy are you? Or give them the Beck depression inventory or something like that. That's the post-test part. So post meaning after the intervention. The question is, do we measure the dependent variable before doing the intervention as well? So if we ask at the beginning, how happy are you now? antidepressants for 6 weeks. How happy are you now? That would be pre-test, post-test. If we only ask them how happy they are at the end, that's post-test only. So, what are the advantages? So the disadvantage of pre-test, post-test is, again, you now have a greater risk of demand characteristics. Now, in the case of the antidepressant trial, they probably already know it's about mood. But if it's like on a survey, like the kind that you guys did, people might not know what you're trying to manipulate. But if you measure something before and after, it's more obvious.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Is what we're checking before and after the dependent variable?
Yes. Yep.
For this post-test, what is the baseline comparison?
Nothing. So with post-test only, there is no baseline. You just compare these two groups on the post-test. And you sort of assume they were the same to begin with because of random assignment. Though you could be wrong. So this isn't in the book, I wasn't going to say this, but one advantage of the pre-test, post-test that the book doesn't mention is if you do pre-test, you can check to see if random assignment worked. You can see if, well, are they roughly the same on the DV before we did the intervention? But you have now the downside of there's an increased chance of demand characteristics. Bless you.
Excuse me.
Did I tell you guys I knew someone who, until she was in her mid-20s, thought that bless you was bless you? And, you know, I don't know how she got through life that way, but...
Did you not know what bless meant?
I don't know, I didn't really interrogate her on it, but...
Right. See, like,
So now whenever I say bless you, that's always what I
but
think of.
if you don't know why you're saying it, then I can see it's just
Yeah.
a thing that it's a quirky.
It's just a thing people say. I mean, I'm an atheist, I still say it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so another, though, advantage of including a pretest is, or relates to selective attrition. So attrition, just by itself, is when people leave the study. And if it's a long-term study, like let's stick with our antidepressant example, you know, not everyone's going to stick around for the study. They may drop out for various reasons. Selective attrition means the kinds of people who leave might be systematically different than people who don't leave.
What was the words you used there?
May be different from the people who don't leave.
You used another word.
Or systematic. You can just say different. I won't.
Well,
And
why are they different?
so let's think through the antidepressant case. So let's say there's the antidepressant group and the placebo group. Let's say that there's 100 people in each group. And let's say at the end there's 99 in the placebo group, but 84 in the antidepressant group at the end. Now, a few things happen. Maybe the really, really sad people left the antidepressant group, and now the mean happiness is higher in the antidepressant group. And they're like, this antidepressant's great. But it's not, it's just because these people left, the sad people. It can also be, this is, I guess, even more of a problem, maybe the antidepressant has bad side effects. And the people who left are all the people who got effed by the side effects. And again, now the mean happiness is higher in this group, but it's only due to the attrition. If you have pre-test information, you can help to see if that's true or not. Not so much with the side effects example, I guess, but you can sort of control for the pre-test score. You can see if the people who, like this more precisely, if the 16 people who left have roughly similar pre-test depression scores relative to the people who stayed, okay, that counts against it being due to selective attrition. There still could be other things going on, but it's at least 1 point against the idea that selective attrition explains this difference. Yep.
What's selective about the attrition?
Just that so attrition means people leaving, selective meaning the people who leave are different kinds of people. Okay. Okay, one other thing you can do in a between subjects experiment that can be helpful is matched pair design, or matched pairs design. So here you just pair people in terms of the DV, or something at least related to the DV, and then randomly assign the pairs to different groups. So let's say instead it's, let's say you have an IQ pill. So you have some pill that you think will boost people's IQ, and then of course you have the placebo group. One thing you can do is measure everyone's IQ and pair everyone with someone with the same IQ or as close as you can to the same IQ. And then for each pair, flip a coin for which group they go to. So that's a way of sort of forcing the two samples to be very close in terms of average IQ before you do the intervention. Sorry? Why isn't it in the assignment section? I don't know. Email the authors of the textbook. I didn't write it.
All right. Flames and torches everywhere. Pitchforks.
Okay, that is everything from chapter 10. Any questions? Okay, so let's get started on chapter 11. So we'll go through stuff here. So the chapter starts off by talking about different sorts of manipulations. The first type it calls straightforward manipulations. So you manipulate the independent variable in a direct, obvious way. So most of your studies, as far as I could see, were very much in the domain of straightforward manipulations. You know, the one that I always remember, because it was funny to see you all do it, you know, telling one group to do jumping jacks and the other group to not do jumping jacks, that's very straightforward. That would definitely count as a straightforward manipulation. Some manipulations fall under the heading of what the book calls staged manipulations. So here it's made to appear real, like not part of the experiment. This generally relies on some form of deception, or at least concealment. So one study I talk about in intro, some of you may have heard of it. They were looking for differences between men from the northern United States and the southern United States. So, and by south, people really mean the southeast, like Texas, Alabama, Georgia, places like that. So the North is what cultural anthropologists call a culture of dignity. Canada's like this too. Whereas the South is a culture of honor. So cultures of honor, one of the norms is, especially if you're a man, if your honor is insulted in some way, you are expected to be ready to retaliate, to defend your honor. That's the more valorized type of behavior. Whereas if you're in a culture of dignity, what's expected is you keep a stiff upper lip. You keep your cool. You don't retaliate. So Canada, very much like that. And so what they looked at in this study was that they brought guys into the lab, and half of them, when they were walking, down the hall, someone would bump into them in the hallway and call them an asshole. And it looked like it was just happened. You just happen to be walking down the hall and someone bumps into you. In fact, it's a stage manipulation. The punchline, by the way, men in the South, their testosterone goes up when they are bumped into, whereas it does not happen for men in the North. And this is not a racial difference. This is just the fact that growing up in a different culture can even shape how your biology reacts to things like threat or insult. So, kind of interesting. As a total aside, this is somewhat conjectural, but one explanation that social and cultural psychologists have put forward, if you look at cultures of honor, they are more likely to emerge in places where animal herding is more common relative to the others. And the idea is, and this is again somewhat conjectural, that if the main source of income or livelihood is animals instead of vegetables, someone can steal all your shit in one night. Like if you're a sheep herder, it's not that hard to get all your sheep. Whereas if you grow corn, it's very hard to steal an entire farm's worth of corn, in a very quick amount of time. So what becomes important in a society like that is you have to maintain a reputation for violence and retaliation if you want to keep your shit. So that is not testable, but some of you might find that interesting. Okay, next term is strength of the manipulation. So you have your independent variable, you have 2 or more levels. One thing you can do is make the difference between the 2 levels bigger, and then it's easier to detect an effect. So one simple example, if you're doing a drug trial, if you have a higher dose, that's a stronger manipulation. You're more likely to detect the effect it has on mood, tumor size, whatever you're studying.
Okay, so it's using an independent variable of a larger power strength?
Yeah, sure, larger power, larger strength. Yeah.
Than what you're declaring?
Not than what you're declaring, just, you would declare it. You would say, I gave them this many milligrams of whatever. And if you want to make it easier on yourself, you'll make the manipulation stronger.
So like all people in the group would get.
Yeah, so here, I'll make this really.
So using an independent variable of a high strength to make a effect stronger.
So let's say it's caffeine. I forget I think it's milligrams. So let's say the control group has 50 milligrams and the other group has 100 milligrams. So you could do it like that.
Okay.
Or, let's say, but you're like, nah, I want to make it a stronger manipulation. The experimental group is getting 500 milligrams of caffeine. Okay, larger, it's whatever effect caffeine has on whatever you're measuring, it's more likely to be detected if you do that. Right? Some manipulations are more subtle. And so here's an example from my own area. In moral psychology, so there's lots of competing theories about the role that reason or slow, careful thinking has on different kinds of moral responses. So the kind of reigning wisdom, although there are critics of this view, but the prevailing wisdom is that slow, careful thinking is more likely to lead to utilitarian judgments. So, for example, push the large man in front of the trolley to save 5. So one thing you can do is manipulate how much people rely on reason. So you can give people cognitive load. That's where you give them a distracting task, like memorize these 8 digits and think about them. And then you give them the moral dilemma while they're holding it in their head. Okay, they can't use careful reasoning anymore. Another one that I use that is simple and seems to work is you just tell one group, use slow, careful thinking as best you can. And the other group, go with your gut. Go with whatever your intuitive or emotional reaction sense. So that would be a very straightforward manipulation. But another manipulation, this one I'm not sure how well it replicates. One condition you see a normal statue, and in one you see this statue. It's like, okay, so you're hoping this one makes them think more carefully. It's like, that's a pretty weak manipulation. And therefore might be harder to detect any effect. Okay, I mentioned this in connection with a previous question. Manipulation check. So here's an example. Let's suppose my hypothesis is that anxiety leads to less cognitive reflection. So people who are anxious rely less on slow, careful thinking. Okay, I just made that up. To my knowledge, no one's tested it. Okay, so I randomly assign people to two conditions, and I don't know, so you stress one of them out. So let's say you lie to people. Let's say I do it with this class. I randomly assign you to two groups, and one group I tell you, you are getting an F in this class. And the other group I tell them, you are getting an A in this class. So there's the two conditions. And then both conditions, I give them a cognitive reflection test. So this is the independent variable, is my manipulation of anxiety. And see, even just thinking about it is producing
Oh, no,
a
no,
reaction.
no. Thomas and I are having a completely different reaction.
Different reaction, okay.
Yes.
So the independent variable is my manipulation of anxiety. Dependent variable is how I measure how reflective you are. One thing I could do, though, is measure anxiety in each group before I measure cognitive reflection. So I just ask each group, how anxious do you feel? And I don't know, maybe the F people are less anxious, though they just give up. They're very relaxed after. And so then we would say the manipulation failed. I meant this to induce anxiety in the F group, but maybe that didn't happen. So if I ask each group how anxious they are, that would be the manipulation check. And it's not exactly the dependent variable. The dependent variable is cognitive reflection. That's the variable I care about, but I'm just doing this to make sure my independent variable operationalization actually worked.
All right, in a sentence that is concise, that I can write on a test, please.
Making sure your independent variable manipulation worked. And if you want, e.g., asking how anxious the two groups are. Yep.
Brienne.
So you would have to expect those, or your measure to correlate with your dependent variable. Like the manipulation check should have some variable it's measuring that correlates with.
So you don't have to do that. That would be a more sophisticated thing. So strictly speaking, the simplest way to do it is I just do a t-test with cognitive reflection. So I just see, is the F group, do they have lower CRT scores than this group? Now what you're asking is, well, what about, so the way I would do it is, so I ask each group how anxious they are, and hopefully this group is more anxious.
Hopefully.
Well, hopefully as far as my hypothesis, not as far as your mental health, but hopefully vis-a-vis my hypothesis, this group is more anxious. And then if I confirm these two are more, that this group is more anxious, I can then sort of forget about the anxiety measure and then just compare here. But what you could do is, you can also see, are these correlated? And you could then do something called a mediational analysis, which we talked about in a prior chapter. You can see if people's reported anxiety mediates the relationship between the IV and the DV. But that is more than you need. All you need for this is just, I want to see if my manipulation actually induced anxiety, so I measure the anxiety in the two groups. I saw it.
Yeah, I'm curious if the manipulation check has to happen for the dependent variable check, or it could happen like at any point after.
I don't want to say it has to. It would certainly be more normal to do it that way. I guess if you do it later, you have less demand characteristics. So, but yeah, I think in theory you could have it after.
Like I was thinking of our memory test that we just did, right? Like in
Yeah.
theory, the manipulation check would have been asking people how they memorized.
Yes. So yeah, I guess you could do it at the end too. Yeah. Is there another hand? Or did that answer? Okay, so what kinds of DVs do we have at Psych? So this is very standard. The textbook has the three main kinds of DVs that we use in psychology. And they are self-report, behavior, and physiology. So self-report is if you want to know about something, you just ask people to tell you. So you want to know how happy someone is? How happy are you on a scale of 1 to 7? You want to know how aggressive they are? You ask them, how aggressive are you? That's all.
Their perception of a trait. Their
That's fine. Yeah,
perception
yeah.
of
Their perception of their own trait. Yeah, that's fine.
their own trait.
Yep. Yeah, that's another correct way of saying it. So behavior. So as most of you know, and you can even guess even if you don't know, self-report has various issues. We've already talked about social desirability as one issue. So behavior is rather than ask people how what their tendency is, you can observe them behave. So instead of asking people how aggressive they are, you could use data on how many crimes they've been convicted of, or school reports of how many fights they got into. You could observe their behavior in the lab. Anything like that would fall under that broad heading. And then the last one, physiology, you take some kind of biological measure. So of course the physiological measure we care the most about in psychology is the 3 pounds of meat between your ears, the brain, that's the one we care about. But we also measure things like heart rate, galvanic skin response, which is a kind of proxy for anxiety. But anything like that falls in the physiology bucket.
Galvanic skin. What was the last word?
Galvanic skin response. You don't have to know those details, those are just examples. So I'll show you the video here. This is actually of someone I used to work with. He did this work before I met him, Eyal Aharoni. So this is not an experiment, but it's a really nice study that combines the latter two, behavior and physiological measures. Self-report we're sort of inundated with in psychology, but this is a really nice study that had the latter two. Though again, it's not an experiment. So yeah, so he goes on to talk about potential ethical issues. We won't worry ourselves with that. But yeah, just a really nice example of a study that combined the latter two. Okay, next term, sensitivity. And here we're talking about sensitivity of measures, sensitivity of dependent measures of dependent variables. And this is just how well is a measure able to detect differences? So there are two threats to sensitivity that you should know. These are threats to sensitivity. Ceiling effects and floor effects. These are sort of, well, not sort of, they are the opposite. a ceiling effect, or I should say, a measure that's subject to the ceiling effect, is a measure where almost everyone gives the highest answer. So I worked in moral psychology. That was my main research area in grad school. Suppose I ask a question like, what percentage of you believe that murdering 3-year-olds is wrong? Near 100%. 1% psychopaths or people who are trolling, right? But basically 100%. Well, now that measure's kind of useless as far as detecting differences between people in moral beliefs or tendencies. I basically have no information. So that would be so ceiling meaning high, right? So basically everyone or nearly everyone gives a high answer to the question. Floor effect, you can probably guess, question where nearly everyone gives the lowest answer. So, how many 3-year-olds have you murdered in your life? Very close to 0 will be what most people do. Sorry, 0 is what most people will give. The average will be very close to 0. Yeah.
The book appears to have very different definitions from those that you just gave. And I just wanted to check, because the ceiling effect is the failure of a measure to detect differences because it was too easy and everyone does well.
Saying it's too easy, I think it's building more into it. Everyone does well is the idea. So everyone gives the high answer. What the book is giving is, that would be one example of the ceiling effect. If you wrote that would be okay. Like, that's one example of one. So a test that had a ceiling effect, if I give you all a test and basically everyone gets 15, like the test is too easy, yes, that would be one kind of ceiling effect. But broadly speaking, it just means everyone gets high on it, or nearly everyone gets high. Okay, so again, those are both threats to the sensitivity of a measure. Okay, so the term demand characteristics already came up. Just one thing I'll mention the book talks about now. One thing you can do to reduce demand characteristics, I tried to do this in my surveys in grad school, is include filler items. So questions that you don't care about, sort of to lead the people astray. So then they're not really sure what the study's about, which is good because then they're not picking up on, ooh, I think the study is about anxiety, or ooh, I think it's about confirmation bias. If you have a bunch of, if you have too much, then they're more likely to get bored, but enough to lead them astray as far as what the study's really about.
Is that considered a form of deception?
That's a good question. I'm inclined to say no, just because, in a certain sense you're leading them astray, but you're not lying to them anyway. Let's put it this way, I don't think it's the kind of deception you would have to include in the debriefing form. So I've had filler items. The ethics people, as I've said, are experts at finding things to complain about, even bullshit things. And they've never asked me to apologize for having the filler items. So, did I tell you about the time they asked me to include 2 emails in the poster because one wasn't enough? So anyway, so they were able to find that, but I never got complaints about the filler items. So you're probably good. Okay, before the next term, I'll show a video, and I promise it is relevant. Okay, so why do I show that? So the next section is on the placebo effect. So, there are people, including some people I know, who hopefully do not see this video, who swear by homeopathic medicine and say, oh, it made me better. Even though, as he says, all it is highly diluted forms of real medicine, down to the point where there's none of it left, or virtually none of it left. I forget if I heard this from him. I heard from someone that their theory is that water has a memory. There's different, quote, mechanisms they posited. all I'll say about that is water has been around a very long time, and I hope it doesn't have a memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, so none of that is testable, but yeah, so the placebo effect is just the fact that if you take something and believe that it is something that will help you, you often do get better on that basis. And often the effect is quite large. So like in antidepressant controlled trials, placebo effect is very large. You know, the antidepressant effect is measurably greater, but good old-fashioned placebos actually work pretty well. Which is why you have to do placebo-controlled trials. So randomly assign people to two groups. One gets the real drug, one gets the placebo. Yep.
I've heard the placebo effect also works if you don't believe it. If you know you're taking a placebo.
Yeah, no, I've heard that too. So yeah, even if you know it's a placebo, it still has an effect. So there you go. Now, most of you probably know what's coming. I'm pretty sure this is covered in intro, but so there's two levels here. If it's a single blind study, that means that the subjects don't know which condition they're in. So, for example, they don't know if they're getting the placebo or the real drug. Double blind is where neither the participants nor the experimenter knows who's in which group. And by experimenter here, I mean the person interacting with the subjects. Obviously, some nerd in the back who's doing the statistics, they know who's in which group, but no one who's interacting with the subjects knows who's in which group. I don't use that as a pejorative. I'm a nerd. I made this joke with my. Oh, sorry, is there a hand?
Wouldn't every experiment be a single blind experiment? Like, isn't that the point?
Almost every. I mean, there's some cases where it can't be.
Okay.
I thought of one example that maybe I shouldn't give, but well, whatever.
Should.
Yeah. I guess so. There was a study that looked at like circumcision, and they had randomly assignment. It can't be single blind.
Right.
Yeah.
You know which group you're in.
Yeah.
So
For curiosity's sake, would our surveys technically be double blind then? Because we, as the experimenter, had no
Right.
idea.
There's no real interaction between. So I guess it would be kind of weird to say it that way because it sort of goes without saying. But yes, technically speaking, I guess there's no one interact. The experimenter who's not interacting with you doesn't know, which condition you're in. Yep. So the reason we do double blind is to control for experimenter expectancy effects. Or I think the book gives two terms for it. The book first uses the term experimenter bias. You can use either one, it doesn't matter, but experimenter bias or experimenter expectancy effects. The idea is, let's say it's an antidepressant study, and I know you're getting the antidepressant and you're getting the placebo. You come in to get the medication. I hope you're doing better. And maybe not deliberately, but unconsciously, my vibes kind of come out, and you get the sense that I'm not so optimistic that you're going to do better. Whereas when you come in, you can tell I'm more hopeful that you're going to do better. And then at the end, you're happier. Maybe you're happier just because of the hope that I showed. So double blind gets rid of.
In a sentence that I
Which
write
one?
in a test.
The expectations of the experimenter affects the participants. Okay, last video of the day, and then we have a few terms after that. Just kind of another cool study. This is an example of the double-blind study, and so it shows you that, but also it's a cool example of how human studies can be inspired by animal studies. So there's a couple of cool examples here. Any questions on this before I erase this?
So if you like yelled at us and scared us when you walked in the room, technically we would learn better.
Yeah, I mean, like, there is something to be said for that, because, yeah, like, and there's neurological reasons for this. Basically, at the end of the hippocampus is the amygdala in each hemisphere. And part of what the amygdala does is, it's like an alarm bell. Ding, 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 pay attention to this. The way I say it to my intro students is, think about walking to class 4 weeks ago. You don't remember anything. But if someone had yelled at you or punched you in the face on your way in, probably you would remember it. Now, ethically, I don't know, I'm not so sure about adding violence or shouting at you all, but. Okay, so just a few terms left. So one is pilot study. So this is when you do a small mini version of your study before doing the real thing. So a little trial run. There's a few advantages to doing this. One thing you can do is just make sure everything works, like if it's a survey. One thing you can do, and this part's not testable, but you can do something called a power analysis. So if it's a small sample, it's unlikely that it will be statistically significant, but you'll get some sense of how big the effect is. And what you can then do is you can estimate, okay, how many people do I need to include in the sample for it to be statistically significant? So that's another nice thing you can do with the pilot
Would
study.
that not be a form of p-hacking?
This is acceptable p-hacking. I mean, because there's nothing wrong with it in the sense that, okay, this is how big the effect is. If I want to successfully detect it, I need this many subjects. The bad thing that's sort of related to this is just continuing to collect subjects and then cutting it off as soon as it's significant. So the good thing to do is you get, let's say, 20 people. It looks like the effect is about this big. And okay, that means I need 400 subjects to get the p-value less than 0.05. And you say in advance, I'm getting 400. You get 400. And then if it didn't work out, sucks to be you. That would be the honest way to do it.
It doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to get a statistic.
No. So power, which I think we talked about in an earlier chapter, power is the probability you will detect an effect if there is one. Mm-hmm. And the more subjects you have, the higher the power. But it's never going to be 100%. Okay, so I think the only two terms that are left are professional conferences and journal articles. So all I have to say here is just, these are your bread and butter when you're a grad student. What you want on your CV is lines under each. You want published articles in peer-reviewed journals. So peer-reviewed journals, if they're good, reject most articles that get sent to them. And even if it does get accepted, typically it's after a long process of revisions and reviewers annoying you with various things.
So the one-sentence answer is?
Articles, you can just write articles in peer-reviewed journals, that'd be fine. Conferences are generally easier to get into. Usually they will have, this is more for your information, there will usually be a poster session where there's lots of more likely grad students or newer faculty presenting their studies. And then the sexier findings or the findings from higher caliber people will be given as talks at the conference. Since a good deal of my grad school was done during COVID, most of my conferences were online, which was great because it was lines on the CV, but I did it from my bedroom, like on Zoom, or from my living room on Zoom. I only went to one in-person conference, which was in Santa Barbara, which was fantastic because Santa Barbara is amazing. But there's one funny story, which I guess is the last thing I have to say today. There's a lot of great Mexican food in Santa Barbara. One was Carlitos, which was very good going down, but something didn't agree with me. And so I thought it was something else, so I went to the toilet, but it turns out it was coming out the front. So I puked into the bathtub.
Yeah.
I was sharing a room with another grad student. And so normally, this is in the morning, normally at that point, we would both walk together to get breakfast. There was a female grad student who had a separate room. Normally we came together. This is her experience. She's sitting in the breakfast area. She sees me come down by myself and then leave with a bucket and gloves. And the thought crossed her mind, is Shafa dead?
Right.
So, no, but anyways. So, and that is all I have to say. Other than, just to remind you all that test 3 is next week, and to say what the questions are, what the written questions are. So, the first one I already said, so it'll be, give me a concrete example of a within subjects experiment. And after that, explain its 2 main advantages. So main 2 advantages of a within subjects design. The other one, and even when I say these 3 terms, it'll be pretty obvious what, how you put these together, or it should be. Explain the connection between the placebo effect, experimenter bias, and a double-blind procedure. So this is probably the easiest test of the 4. Now don't get overconfident, still study for it, but in theory, should be relatively easy.
That's good news. I have 3 next week.
Oh yeah, so that's good. So for some of you it's timely. Does anyone have any questions? Yep.
Just didn't hear that last part. Is it placebo effect, experimenter bias, and
A double-blind procedure. Yep.
The first one, you want us to explain its 2 main functions?
2 main advantages. And by advantages, I mean advantages over the between subjects design. Yep.
The second one is the placebo effect, experimenter bias, and experimental procedure.
Double-blind experimental procedure. Okay, you're all free to go. I'll stick around if you have more questions. Good luck on the test.